Welcome to Planning Phase Syndicate. This is a deck tech first pass at updating Qi'ra Command for the new meta without Boba and with set 3, Twilight of the Republic. Join me as we look at my old list, we go to the new list, and we kind of say, hey, these are some of the cards that I feel will be more beneficial in the new meta that we are going to be experiencing. So this is the list that we had in set 2, where we were facing a lot of Boba, a lot of Sabine in the meta. Now we have a whole new meta that we got to look at. So I've decided to kind of take this list and say, hey, what can I cut? What can I not? Do I not need anymore? And should I be teching in more stuff for aggro? We'll kind of see how the meta fleshes out. This is my old list. You're welcome to look it up. I'll link a video in the chat of my original deck tech for this, and you're welcome to check that out if you want to know a little bit more about how to play the deck. Currently, this is the list that I am on. I have added a few things in here. There's always room for more tweaks. There's probably a few cards in here that can be cut that probably aren't as prevalent, and maybe a few things that we need to add in if we want to. One of the big notices is that we've added some more 3-drops, which puts us at quite a few 3-drops. And in the future, we'll probably want to cut that down. We probably won't need quite as many 3-drops as we had before. The big notice is I took out the Black Sun Enforcers. I don't 100% agree with that, but for now, I like having that 3/4 in space that can activate droids. But in reality, the main thing, it's just a 3/4 in space. If you wanted to switch this, there is a lot more blue cards to set. If you did want to switch this to a chili version, where you run Chilson, we could make some adjustments pretty quickly to allow for that, where it would basically, right now, this deck has only got, I don't know what, 6, 9, 12, 13, 14 green cards. We could actually cut that down, probably down to 9. You have to keep those Vaders in there, and we got to keep the overwhelming barrage in the super laser text, but we could probably cut the rest of some of that stuff down if we wanted to go for a Chilson route. Currently, right now, I am not going to be going the Chilson route, but doesn't mean in the future that would be something we need to consider, especially if aggro is continuing to rise. So our deck strategy really has not changed. Set 3 is going to include a lot more token units. So controlling the board has changed because there's going to be a heavier amount of set units that we're going to have to remove. And there's probably going to be quite a bit more Sentinel we're going to need to create. Our ultimate goal is obviously to control the unit, control their board with our units using Overwhelming Barrage, and Qi'ra's flip turn to kind of neutralize and stabilize our board to be able to finish everything off pretty quickly once you hit your end game. ECL now is a commodity to nuke their bigger targets. Before we had to use that as a controlling piece, but now we can actually save that. We don't have to use that right away. We can kind of save it for closer to mid game to be able to help protect Qi'ra on her flip turn. What did we have? What have we added? My main adds are Grievous. I've added 1 Zillow Beast. I've added Calculating Magna Guards. I've added Rune Hanko, and I've also added the Magna Guard Wing Leaders. Out of these, the Magna Guard Wing Leaders are probably the closest thing to being cut, though I really do like having that 3/4 in space. I don't have a lot of space. We could go with a 4-cost Sentinel in space. We could go back down to the 3-cost Black Sun Enforcer. Those are kind of some of the options we have depending on if we need to have more Sentinel in this deck. The ability to have Rune Harnko is so great. If a friendly unit has been defeated, this phase, you can give -1/-1 to any unit for that phase, right? So basically, if you defeat one of your own units, play him out. It's even better. The best part is you can use Vader's ambush to run into somebody, and then this also can be pulled with Vader and gives you an additional -1/-1. So you can ambush a 6 health unit, let's just say a Maul, for example, with Vader, trade the Vader and the Maul, bring this guy out, and then immediately it kills the other side's Maul. I don't know, it seems like a pretty good take to add into keeping with Vader. We can also pull General Grievous, which General Grievous is he's a 3-cost 4/4. He is insane with Overwhelming Barrage on that turn. He is also insane with being able to ambush him out if you really need to take out something in an earlier turn. And usually he survives. He's got 4 health. I don't know. He's so good for an early gameplay. It's really hard to not include him in some of what we have going on, right? Calculating Magna Guards essentially is a churn extra churn sentinel. This gives us one sentinel for that specific churn. And then if we use another unit that we have on the board, so for example, super laser tech, and we kill off super laser tech, you then get to have this calculating magna guard become sentinel again. So a couple of different plays. You could play your calculating magna guard. It's sentinel. They can't swing through it. It's got 4 health, which is really, really good. Then you turn around and your next turn, you could play a super laser tech and then use Qi'ra to kill it, and it becomes sentinel again. So it's just really, really good. It's that 3 costs being able to be in there if you have another unit on the board. Highblown Enforcers is a great one. Usually those die by turn 3. Just kind of making him a sentinel for 2 to 3 turns is just so good, especially during the Sabine game when they don't have the overwhelm specifically at the beginning until they get a little bit farther in. Zillow Beast is also something I added that I've been playing around with. It's a really good endgame card in the aspect of where Snoke kills things. Zillow Beast can come off the turn after that, and essentially what he does is he has the ability to give every ground unit -5. So if they're playing a space deck, you're out of luck. It's not worth playing this. But if you're playing a non-space deck and you got somebody on the ground, you get Zillow Beast out, and guess what Zillow Beast does? It just gives all of their -5, so it stops their turn. So if you have other units on the board, you're able to swing in, take care of some of the units. Basically, they might as well either play something or claim. If you put this down and they don't claim right away, then you just claim, and you could take the Zillow Beast and just run into their stuff. Secondary considerations, things that I've been looking at, debating on what I want to do. Lethal Crackdown is a option. I don't like it as much because it has to defeat a non-leader and you have to do damage to your base. And we don't care as much about the damage to the base outside of an aggro race, but even in an aggro race, if I'm able to use this to kind of defeat any of their leaders, it's really good. The problem I've had is when I played around with it and put it in main deck, I didn't have a lot of units that were worth, like I had to pay 4 plus do all that damage to my base. It didn't feel very good personally. So kind of, I wish it was a little bit cheaper. It has like a higher tax cost on it than Power of the Dark Side, but it is something that you can use to kind of get off. I doubt we'll put it in, but it is a consideration. Private Manufacturing is another card that I've considered as it helps tutor your deck. Right now, I don't need to tutor my deck specifically. I'm never going to have, token units out, right? So the probability is that this card is probably not worth it. I will say though, if we were to swerve a little bit to be able to put a few token generation units in, then I probably would consider this. Just because it's a card draw, and we may have to do this if pillage becomes necessary. So I think that's where like the conversation has to go, is like, is pillage and force throw and these things going to be so prevalent for Qi'ra that it like bogs us down and we need card draw, or is it going to be something where we can use this as a tutor card? It's a bubble card for me. Huang, I'm not liking him as much, but I have enjoyed being able to play him, give my Sentinel +2/+2, which has been really good. The problem is if you don't get a Sentinel down, it doesn't work very well. So I would consider him a bubble card for the pure fact that he's very good until they kill him. So against control decks, he's not very good. Against, aggro decks, he actually works out really well, but I kind of feel he's a little overrated. We'll have to kind of see again how the meta fleshes out. If they're going to have trouble killing some of my units, or they have too much ease in it, then I think we bring him back in to kind of help put a buffer. But every time I played him, it felt like I could be doing something else for 3, and I almost just rather ramp than even play him. But he has been beneficial if you have a Sentinel out, which kind of makes him a secondary consideration depending on where we go with the meta. Clone is also a card I was really high on, like super, super high on in the early part of this series. I'm not as high on that card now. If you're going with the Chilson route, it's hard to want to play it, right? Like it's just not as fun to play. I think it's one of the things that I would consider going to, depending on if we're going to have a little bit more control. If we're going to end up with more control, then clone becomes really good because you can clone anything. You can clone a Devastator. You can a non-vehicle unit. So it can't be a Devastator, but you can clone a Wrecker if you wanted. You can clone another Maul. You can clone a Snoke. That's actually hilariously dirty. I played a matchup where I was testing clone. was able to put Clone down. They had a Snoke down because they ramped before me. I put Clone down and copied their Snoke and ended up like killing off 3 of their units. And they didn't see that coming. So Clone is actually a pretty high consideration to have a conversation about later on. I think we got to see what other decks are going to play, but just being able to copy something and give this like a crate dragon status is just really, really good. Stuff that I've been looking at cutting. I'm going to say Power of the Dark Side, and people are going to be like, no, you can't cut that. And so far in testing, I'm not actually going to cut that card. I'm only going to cut that card as if token decks become so rampant that it's not worth playing. I will say it's a lot harder when decks have 2 turn 1 plays and can play that. But at the exact same time, I've also found that the Power of the Dark Side is a really good tempo decrease for your opponent, that it's hard to want to cut that card. And I'll give an example. If they play 2 units down turn 1 and you don't have something to kill it, it still takes off one of those units. It's not as good. But against like Sabine decks or some of these other decks that are not going wide in the very first like turn, it's still like really beneficial. Like, I mean, against a Fennec, I can stop them with this card. I can also play this against like Han or anything that runs pillage, because a lot of times if I don't have the initiative, I don't play a turn 1 play. I just claim and skip right to turn 2. And then if they choose not to play anything, I'm ahead. If they play something and I want to kill it, I have Power of the Dark Side. So it is a possible cut if we see token decks become rampant to the point where it's just not even worth like putting down. Pershing is the other one. Again, people are going to chide me a little bit. If we move to an aggro meta, though, I just don't have the time to draw a card. Like, I'll be honest, like I just don't. Pershing is really nice if we're going to run into a lot of what I would call pillage, force throw, spark of the rebellion. If those are all going to be like strip your hand, then then Pershing has to come back. And it might just be a sideboard, but it's going to have to come back. And that's kind of the same thing with Palp's Return, right? Like, I use Palp's Return in the event that I play discard decks. Those decks, like, I have to do it for discard. If discard becomes not a thing, I don't see myself needing to retain that. Make an opening is the last one that is a discussion of cutting. It's really hard to want to do that. If these space decks are going to be still there, we're keeping make an opening. But like, if you can spawn 2 tokens, make an opening becomes a lot less impactful. But if we're still going to have these space decks that Qi'ra does struggle with, because we don't run a lot of space, we might have to keep that card in there. These are the cards I still find extremely impactful. Super Laser Tech would not cut that. Resupply. Again, we could go to less ramping, but the problem is that if we play other control decks, I want that. I need that ramp. I have found that even against Sabine, if they don't go super wide, I'm probably playing a resupply, or a Super Laser Tech or something to be able to get to Qi'ra to get her to her flip turn. I'll eat a little bit of damage, and keep her that way until we get to that turn. But then at the same token, I need the Overwhelming Barrage for my flip turn for the 5 cost. So it kind of conflicts with that, but it just depends on your playstyle. But really, I don't think we're going to have to, I don't see a need to cutting resupply. I do only run 2 of them, which is against the Alex rule. If you watch our podcast, Alex will tell you should either run 3 or nothing. I am currently only running 2 and have had decent success in Qi'ra specifically this way. Overwhelming Barrage, obviously we don't want to cut that. We're going to have token units out. This is going to be great for discarding token units. Again, we talked a little bit earlier about the Grievous play. Grievous into Overwhelming Barrage is just so really good. I can then technically shield Grievous if I play him on turn 3. I can then the next turn play an Overwhelming Barrage. I can flip Qi'ra, not have to worry about. Now I've got 2 targets that are alive that can be used for Overwhelming Barrage and just wipe the board. It's such a good card. There's no way, unless they ban this card, that we can get rid of this. Death Troopers, I went down to 2 from 3. I still feel that they're very impactful, especially when you play them with Vader. I don't know if I would cut them as long as I'm playing Vader. Forlom and Gideon, it's the same thing. Gideon, like the ECL targets right now are just so good that I have a hard time wanting to get rid of Gideon. If we're going to go do a token meta, I'm going 3 Gideon. Like Gideon will get bumped up if we have such a huge token meta, because Gideon will just be like stacking, 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 stacking. And that's what we need with Gideon. So Gideon actually will have stocks up over Lon Pike, in fairness, if we go to that meta. Lon Pike is just always a good one as a control piece to be able to give that shield to a space unit you can't kill. Like, what do you care? Hopefully you get a Power of the Dark Side, or make an opening or something, or a Fell of the Dragon or something to kill it. But the Lon Pikes, I feel, are going to be less impactful in token metas than the Gideons, but they're still going to be a good ECL target for it. Now that we've talked a little bit about the cards keeping, the sideboard stuff is where we've moved everything, right? So currently, this is the deck I've been playing around with the sideboard. Here's my opinion. If we're going to go into a very heavy aggro meta, we need to tech a little bit more for Sabines, and we need to tech a little bit more for the newer aggro decks that we could possibly see come out of the woodworks. Anakin, possibly, because Anakin likes to trade with our units, but I don't think Anakin's going to be as impactful into this deck because we're not giving them units all the time. So we don't have that same issue. I do currently have 2 Mauls and 2 Super Laser Techs in the main deck. That could be switched around. Super Laser Tech, or Super Laser Blast, sorry, may be something that is not a viable card, or it might be so impactful I have to have 3. I currently am running 2 because that's how I've been playing the game. I feel that we could play around with the number of those. If we're going to go to a more heavy aggro, I think those become a sideboard card, and we bring in the top targets as well. I know the deck has more than 50 cards, so that kind of gives you some play room to wiggle room around. I did go down to only 2 of the Infernal Fours. I have found that card a lot less impactful in tutoring than originally thought. Again, I'm not sold on getting rid of it completely. Same with like the making openings. I'm not sold with getting rid of that completely, but like that turn 1 spot, I just don't have anything better to play right now, and that's the big deal. We could look at Gamorrean Guards, but we don't really run any green, so it would just be a 3/2 unit versus the Sentinel on the ground, and then we're weaker in space. So there is a possibility of discussing what we could do to shore up space. Hence why we can't get rid of the takedowns yet. We can't get rid of the making openings yet, and we can't technically get rid of the Power of the Dark Side yet. But we could talk through how do we build a little bit more space oriented. I think for this set, we're not going to have to worry too much about like an extreme space presence outside of maybe 1 or 2 decks. My guess is we'll see a Django rise up out of the ashes of the Boba red deck that used to be a space. My guess is we'll get Django. That's the highest probability for it. And in that case, we might need to look at what can we do to stop them from racing our board. Again, top target is probably the biggest one that might come in as a main decker over some of the other ones. I am not 100% sold on that 3-cost space unit either. That might be something that just kind of comes out. And as you can see, I did move First Lights, which were originally in my main deck. I moved those to the sideboard, and those will probably currently be cut, is my guess. They're a great card to be able to resource and bring out, and it is really good. Like, I had very good success with it, especially if they couldn't kill my Snoke or my Avenger. But what I found is against like aggro decks, they're almost a little too slow, and it's not always worth it. So I won't lie and say that I have flipped a First Light, done 4 damage to a Vader. Vader then swings in for 9. Pretty good. I don't know. So it's a conversation about, that's my tech card that a lot of people aren't running. And I think there is some playability here for that specifically. With that being said, that's going to wrap up our Qi'ra Set 3 first pass deck tech for Qi'ra Command. I really like Qi'ra. Qi'ra is one of my favorite characters. I've been playing Qi'ra since the beginning of Set 2. Love it so much. I feel that Qi'ra has a place, especially with Boba going down. I feel Qi'ra has a place, but we're going to have to start teching towards more aggro decks that we see come out of the woodwork, and we're going to have a conversation at some point about discard decks, because discard decks are one of Kira's biggest weaknesses, and you can play around it. It is something that is play aroundable, but you have to be very careful in how you do that specifically. With that being said, please like, subscribe, and follow to learn more about Planning Phase Syndicate and to hear our weekly podcast that we have coming out every week. Thank you all. Have a good night, and we'll see you on the Flippity Flop.